So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Biz Talk, the Black Business Empowerment and Economic Empowerment Talk Show. My name is Ade Shukoya. I'm the host, and this show is brought to you by Circulate. As you know, Circulate exists to increase the number of times that money circulates around the Black community. The end goal ultimately is obviously to build the economic basis of the UK Black community, with the view that a community is only as strong as it can provide for its own economic needs. This is not an exclusive but an inclusive approach, because it's recognizing that as a contribution to the bigger society, it's important that each community is able, strong communities basically build up societies. But in a nutshell, we weren't here last week, as you may know. And I have to start by saying it's been a tough couple of weeks. It's got better over the last few days, but it's been a tough couple of weeks. Even just talking about this right now, just really, some of you know, the Black community lost a giant. A giant. A few weeks ago, I met Paul back in about 2002 when I joined the 100 Black Men of London. That was a point in my life when I was going through a transition from a negative life and making that transition into a positive life. And I joined the 100 Black Men of London. Then there were a series of men whose way of living, way of approaching the community challenges really inspired me and helped me to put together my own road to boardroom template. And Paul Lawrence was one of those key people. He was like a mentor. He nurtured, he guided. And so it came as a big shock to hear about his passing, especially considering that I was speaking to him only a few days before that. So we've done many things over the years together. And I was only speaking to him a few days before that because myself, him, Brother Davis, so you'll know Brother Davis is the founder of Manhood Academy Global. We're working on an initiative that we were going to be bringing to the Black community in the second week of January. So to get that piece of news was just really, it was really hard. As some of you might have seen from the intro video there, Paul has featured as kind of the icon face in that for a while. Paul was one of my first guests on this show, was the first guest on the show. Okay. He was that type of guy, as many of you know. When I reached out to him and say, Paul, I'm starting this, I'd like you to be on there. It's like, yep, send me the details, I'm there. So even just watching back that video and seeing him, it's tough. It's tough. But we had the 9 nights the other night, which was an awesome event online. And recognizing that, you know, his spirit has moved on to the ancestors, you know, gives a bit, but I'm not gonna lie, it still cuts, man. Even just like you might see right now, just talking about it, it's just still hard for me to conceive. And I guess that's in line with kind of some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm blessed to have a long-term friend who was just commenting how we haven't, seen each other for a while, obviously through social media. Great thing about social media, enables you to stay in contact with people who you may not necessarily physically be able to see all the time. And so I'd like to introduce to the author Kwame McPherson. So, hey Kwame, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And it's interesting you said about Paul, because I met Paul through, because he's an ardent Jamaican, and everything Jamaica, Paul's, so that's how I met.
I used to call him, his name. My name for him was Nigerian Yardi. He used to call me honorary Jamaican. He said, "I'll get a pass coming to Jamaica."
And so that's how I met him through that circle, actually, and then that's how I got to know. And I guess we're kind of similar in a way, because we traverse various circles, because I'm Jamaican to the core as well as he is. So that's how I got to meet him, and then learning about what he did outside of the Jamaican community, so to speak, and the inroads that he was making. I was impressed, very impressed with him, and realizing that he was in the process of going home. and that really hit me, that he was on the cusp. And the reason why I know this, because we were talking about housing and properties and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was surreal. It's surreal to know that he's no longer around. But like you said, the legacy that he has left is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal legacy, and one which has inspired me, has inspired many others that I do know of. And like you said, the Nine Night was phenomenal. Hundreds of people on, which go to show a testament to the man himself. And yeah, and that we take from him and carried on. That each person in that Nine Night can take something away which they can use as a legacy from which Paul has left them, where they can now spread it out further. You know what I mean? So that's a beautiful thing, that his legacy is not only within us, but it's passing through us to others. And that's how we touch, and that's how we be able to keep his name alive. His brother, I don't know if you know that his brother is a phenomenal journalist in Jamaica, and he's a sports journalist, and he's well known. And so yeah, so I know his brother's taking, because they were very close, very very close, and I know his brother's taking it very hard too. So in addition, so my condolences to everyone, because like I said, it's one of those shoes that can never be filled. But we have to recognize that, even though that may be the case, we have our own shoes to wear, which we have
Of
taken
course,
from him, if that makes sense.
of course, of
So
course.
we've taken aspects of what he has done for us and for me, and we're taking that, and we're going out and sharing and doing what we've got to do. So yeah, a phenomenal legacy, phenomenal.
Indeed. So, Paul, I know you're watching right now,
Yeah, yeah,
bro.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
Kwame,
yeah,
so first of all,
yeah.
thank you for joining us, and please just introduce yourself to the people out there. So, yeah, just
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity again. Like I said, well, my name is Kwame McPherson. I'm an entrepreneur, and that basically is an author as well as an entrepreneur. I am a book coach, a book mentor. I enable other people to share their story, share their journey, and I always say that first and foremost, I'm a griot. I'm a storyteller. So for me, telling stories in the written word and keeping that alive for us as a people is important. So anyone can have a unique voice. We all have unique voices, and I enable them to tell that voice to a wider audience or to the wider world. So that's what I do in a nutshell. Because as you know, we're very multifaceted. There's many things that we do. But yeah. So the writing is what I love most, and it's the core of who I am. And like I said, I love telling stories. I love to empower and enlighten people. I provoke thought, and so I do that through the written word. The written word.
awesome, great stuff. And you're right, yeah, we're multifaceted, and like my good friend Lloyd keeps on saying, there's lots of work to do. We got work to do. So yeah,
What work to do?
we've got to be multifaceted in order
Yeah.
to be able to carry on those legacies, to make an impact and make the change. And to all listeners, just so that we're aware, this show is really about not focusing on the problems, but looking at the solutions, not making
Absolutely.
anyone right or wrong, but looking at how do we change things for the better. And like I
Yeah.
always say as well, this is not an exclusive thing, it's an inclusive. How do we involve other communities to
Yeah.
help build our community so that the whole survives? As the Gestalt theory says, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So how do you bring all that
Exactly.
together to make it better? So
Totally.
let's jump straight in, because like I said, I think this is a very well-timed show. So for everybody who might not
Right.
know, this was actually scheduled for last week. I
Right.
contacted Kwame and said, Kwame, I'm not in a position right now to be able to get on air. I'm still gonna,
Yeah.
stay shock. And he recognized that as well. So I appreciate that, brother. So, but tell us about your book. You have a book called My Date with Depression. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
And it's funny because, and here it is. That's the cover, My Day with Depression. You can see it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Um. The funny thing, this particular book, because like I said, I've written quite a number of books. This one is I've never written anything about me in terms of my journey. The only time I've ever written anything about myself was a short story, and that, funny
Okay.
enough, that short story was in one of my first short story books that I've done, called Deep Root Strong Tree, and that story was about domestic abuse and what I witnessed between my mother and my father, right? So I've never written anything else about myself in terms of my journey. Everything else has been fictionalized or non-fiction, and so this book I decided to write for whatever reason. And I had finished it back in 2015. That's when I actually had it done, but I lost the manuscript because I had it on the USB. The USB got corrupted, and then that was it. So and there was a lot of
Hold
work
on
on
one
that.
second. Hold on, just 1 second. Just for you younger listeners out there who don't know anything about USDs and USBs and floppy disks, this came before the cloud. So this is how we used to have to store data and carry it
Yeah,
around.
exactly,
Somebody a bit like,
exactly.
what do you mean you lost it? How can you lose it? What are you talking about? It's in the cloud. It's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now this context again.
So yeah, I had a USB and a USB got corrupted. But funny enough, what had happened was, and I had a lot of work on it, a lot of manuscripts, a lot of content, and as when you're writing something, to lose it is one of the worst things ever. Because you just can't get it back. And then I was looking through Facebook, and and with Facebook now, when you send an attachment, you can actually see what you've sent to a friend. And I was looking at my friends, I was messaging my friend and said, "Oh, I saw the attachment." I said, because I had sent it to him to read. And I downloaded it, and this was back in 2018. So 3 years after, I downloaded it, and yeah, and then I just put it together, got it proofread and edited. The cover came to me, just as you know, being inspired as a creative, it came. And I put out the cover first, and people were like, "Oh, wow, this is awesome!" I'm bearing in mind that we weren't even thinking about what we're going through right now. You know what I mean? This is like 2 years ago, right? So yeah, I put it together, and then late 2018 is when I actually pushed it out in its entirety, right? So, I was away for quite a bit in the Caribbean, and I came back and I said, all right. As I came back, I started doing workshops and seminars and so on and so forth. And then lo and behold, coming into 2020, this happened. You know what I mean? COVID, lockdown, everything else. And since then, it's because of what we're going through, people could relate, because this time we still haven't seen the repercussions of what we're going through at this point in time, especially in terms of mental ill health. And the book does seem to be right on time. It's so a lot of interest has been generated about my own journey and what I had faced in terms of going through what I went through at the time. And it's a number of incidences which had led me to become in a particular place, and I mean being depressed, and yeah, and so now the book is doing very well in terms of being out there, being getting like here where I'm talking with you now, letting people understand. And the other thing about the book, which is also very important and invaluable, is the fact that it's coming from a black man.
Okay.
And that has been said quite a bit because we, as you know, we're not very emotive. We don't talk about how we're feeling. We don't like being vulnerable. We have this persona and the facade that we have to keep up, even when we're in pain or hurting. And I was one of those people. So that also has come back to me. I want to share the book with other men, because men have approached me about the book, and they're basically giving thanks that I'm able to share their story through my story. So that's what's happened with the book in that regard, and we can go into it in terms of detail, which I'm sure we will do. But in the overview, that's how the book came about. And like I said, this lockdown situation that we're going through has made it even more valid than ever before, and over the past couple of years.
Yeah, of course, definitely. So, I mean, obviously, we all know what's been happening over the last year or so. And in a moment, we definitely will be speaking about the tier 4 situation, because I believe that is potentially could be the straw that breaks the camel's back for quite a few people for a number of reasons, but we'll discuss that
I
shortly.
agree.
But I think you touched on something really key and fundamental there. You spoke about the fact that, it's important that this book is written from a black male perspective. And then you also mentioned the fact that as black males, we don't tend to express, I mean, I'm sure this holds true for males in any type of race.
Yeah, of
But
course.
we're focusing on our context here, which is black males tend to not necessarily express ourselves and not be vulnerable. Something that comes up quite a bit. And there seems to be a correlation between that and the rise in the number of mental health cases that affect black males. Suicide.
Exactly.
Depression. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that as men, black males, we do not necessarily have healthy outlets to express or let out what we're experiencing or sharing?
It's a number. There's a number of things, a number of variables. The one is basically, like I said, in terms of societal norms, which we've inherited over the years, which means that a black man must be strong. He must be seen to be strong. how we're perceived in that regard by others, whether it's our own partner or whether the wider society or community.
In what sense? When you say how we're perceived, do you want to expand on that for those who might not understand that context?
Okay, so for example, if you look in the media, you know what I mean. So we take media as an example. You'll see that we're always portrayed to be aggressive, in terms of how we're featured, and we're always portrayed to be overly sexualized. You know what I mean. So there's a certain negative aspects that have been associated with us, and that's how we're perceived. Even though you and I know that that's not who we are, but when you see it on the television, for example, or on the media, or in the newspaper, and so on and so forth, that's how we're seen.
I like the way you did that. Television. So just for you guys out there, that wasn't anything to do with the accent. Carry on.
So that's how it's perceived. That's how we're perceived. And even like I said, if you go into films or dramas or movies, whatever it is, that we're always seen to be strong. We're always seen to be aggressive. We're always seen to be, that kind of individual. So that perception is what people will have when they go on the street, right? So that's the unconscious bias, if you want to call it that people see have been planted because of what they've been visualizing or what they've been being given to see. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I think also, which has a significant factor, is our interaction with the system or the way the system has played out over generations. So, for example, one of the things I touched on in my own book is, say, for example, if for African Caribbean men in particular, or African American men, for example, is I think there's a historical context in terms of why we weren't able to be open, or why we can't be seen to be vulnerable. And what I've touched on in my book, even though I'm no psychiatrist, I'm no psychologist, but this is based on my own experience, is that when the enslavers took our families, our partners, our children, and they split up the families and the partners and the children, the black man at that time could not be seen to be weak. He wanted to do something. He wanted to fight. He wanted to defend his family. He wanted to defend his community, but he couldn't do so, right? He maybe wanted to cry, but he could not be seen to be weak in front of the enslaver. So for me, that is more or less what we carry throughout our DNA, I think, in terms of we put in front of a situation. It's a stressful situation, but we can't afford to be seen to be weak because of where the environment that we're in, the system that we're living under. And so that is what then plays out in how we relate and interact with those around us.
So it's interesting how you should say that as well, because it's like there's the genetic trauma DNA that's being passed down. But there's something interesting about what you said there, which is not appearing to be weak. Now, under a normal type system or normal engagement, a man will step up and defend his context. Yeah. That's my not being weak. I'm a protector. But in a situation where it's totally disabled, it's actually suicide and counter beneficial to whatever you're trying to achieve, whereby you've got to now be passive. The next thing, in order not to be seen to be weak, is to hold in all that toxic emotion and everything else to say, okay, this is the best tool I've got right now, because all my other tools of a normal natural instinct are disabled, right?
Exactly. So that emotion, so we hold on to that, and then, as you know, it's carried through our blood, through our generations, right? So up until this day, we have. I think that is one. I really sincerely think that is a source of to why we have not been able to express as much, and then as much as we can, and then you have the layers on top, like I said, the societal stuff that comes on top. So I think that revisiting the source will enable us to understand why we can't be vulnerable in front of those who we perceive to love, or who we say we love, and how we can't, why we can't be weak with them, and in that regard. And bearing in mind, like I said, in this particular environment, for example, when we're going to the workplaces, when we're in the boardrooms and so on and so forth. Again, when certain things are happening, and then you return home, you carry that with you, right? And you can't open up the boy, So all of these variables and all of these layers is what cause, I think, a situation. That's why we don't open up, why we're not emotive, why we're not vulnerable, in front of those who we should really be vulnerable with. You know?
I mean, it's a great
Yeah,
point that you raised there about, in the boardrooms, obviously, I mean, people, well, yourself, myself, we spend a lot of time in various boardrooms. And yeah, there's certain things that happen that once again, you just have to,
exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
But obviously, it brings
Exactly.
up all the emotions. And then
Mm.
sometimes, depending on what your context is, you might not necessarily have the right environment at home where you could even go and
There you
express,
go.
hey, here's my
Yes.
day and here's what's going on with that. So
Yeah.
over time we have to. But okay. And I know Freddie, my good friend Freddie Krugenwacker, who was on the
Okay.
show previously, he does
Yeah.
a show on Instagram at 9 p.m. So check him out, Freddie Krugenwacker,
Yeah.
on
No.
on
Anything.
called Grief,
Yeah.
which I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's aimed at looking at managing emotions,
Right.
and dealing with that. But let's open the floor and let's burst that stereotype, and at least in this context, which is, so you said my date with depression
Yeah.
was about your journey.
Yes.
What aspects of that are you able to share with us?
All right, now I can share quite a bit actually, because one of the things that I'm going to touch on is, for example, what causes depression. And funny enough, because I did some research, obviously, prior when putting the book together. So these are what I came up with. Even though it's not an exhaustive list, it gives you an indicator of what can cause depression. So, for example, you have job loss, financial woes, failed relationships, death of loved ones, heredity, relationship difficulties, separation and divorce, stressful jobs and lack of support at work or at home, not being promoted or being promoted above one's capabilities, being a new father. So these are just a little bit of examples, and plus there's more, as you know,
Of
there's
course,
more,
I get it.
there's an entire list of why that happened,
Mm.
and I think, and like I said, one of the things that I had touched on, as we had said, is in regards to black men in particular. And I'm going to read an excerpt here.
Okay.
And it's by Professor Dinesh Bugra. So he says in his article, "The Truth About Men and Depression," wrote, "There are differences related to cultures and countries, but men are more likely to complete the act of suicide, whereas women are more likely to attempt suicide. As a result of the British legacy in many countries in the Commonwealth, the act of suicide remains illegal. So if your gun does not get you, the legal system will. More than 40 years ago, looking at low rates of suicide in black men in New York, it was observed that the rates of suicide were indeed low, but those of homicide in this group were high,
Stop right
indicating that."
there. I think, yeah. So wait, want you to come back there. And I think you've touched on really a key point there. That's something which I used to call two-pack syndrome, which in effect, and then there were times. So I'm going to also be vulnerable to this. There was times when I was involved in some of the things I was involved in before my life. So when I was involved in gangs,
Yeah,
and there were times when I knowingly put myself in situations which were potentially death. And in some ways, as I grew out of that and look back on it, I could reflect and see actually it was a form of suicide, because it's
yeah.
like, I'm not going to take my life because there's all this negative stigma around it. But hey, at this moment, I'm so unhappy with life. If somebody kills me, I'm happy that they'll be doing me a favor.
Funny you should say that, because that's what the next sentence says.
There you go. See it
it
there?
said,
Wow.
it said, indicating that men swagger their way out by arguing, "I will kill or get killed."
I ain't killed nobody. Just to be clear, I ain't killed nobody. But I can
Yeah,
relate to that. That's why I used to call two-pack syndrome.
yeah. So it said men tend to use more violent methods in completing suicide, and they tend to deal with their depression by drinking or through aggressions or acts of violence, for example. So, and it says, and I'm going further to say here, African Caribbean men are unique. Our history making us who we are today, what we went through now, could be traced to the massive trauma our ancestors endured. Women too have been devastated by the Mahatma, which is the journey. So the both of us have a testimony to this legacy. So exactly like I was saying earlier, in regards to how it displayed this depression, and I just wanted to touch on
Sure.
the background in that regard. So in terms of my journey began when I had left the UK to live in Canada. I went to live for a period of time, and I went there on the basis of setting up a business with some partners. I was able to get in and I was able to start putting the groundwork in. But my partners couldn't come in because one of them came from, I think, the Middle East, and there was a lot of problems with the Middle East, and the other one wasn't ready to come over to Canada yet. So anyway, what transpired was that I was able to get a lot of money, quite a lot of money, a line of credit to set up business or businesses. So I got all this line of credit, and then I basically I didn't have the finance knowledge or education. At the time, I think I went to a number of personal development seminars, and that inspired me to say, you know what, I can go out and do it. But I didn't have the knowledge. So anyway, I went out, got this, I think it was about 100,000, 150,000 pounds, well, at the time it was Canadian dollars, and I made some investments, without the knowledge. And what then started to happen, and I also had a partner which I thought knew what he was doing, but in the end he didn't, and I was just spending money and trying to prop up these businesses. So for example, I invested in real estate, so I had property. I invested in standalone stores, retail stores, one which was an import-export company. The other was importing lingerie from Brazil. So there's a lot of activity, but they weren't making any money. And then eventually, because I was spending so much, everything tanked, right? And then started to get calls, the creditors and the bank started to call me, because they want the money back, and so on and so forth. And then basically, what happened is that because I was unable to respond, I internalized that stress, because I was living with my cousin at the time. No, I was living in my own apartment, and then lost the apartment, ended up living with my cousin, and yeah, so I internalized the stress, and then that basically just compounded everything, and drove me into a place where I didn't know I was in it, actually, to tell you the truth. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later. But so that's what happened. So when I moved back to my cousin now, I was living in a basement. I'd be isolated. I'd have the curtains drawn. And when I came out of the house, I tended to go for long walks, aimlessly, So those are indicators that I was in a particular place, but I didn't know it. I had no clue that I was in it. And it went over a period of time until, because my cousin didn't see me, because she was at work all the time. But I think one day she was home, or she was on leave, and she noticed my behavior. And another thing that was also abnormal for me, I ended up going into church, and when she started to see all this kind of thing going on, she said, "Hold on a minute, that's not Michael." And so that which is my former name, and she told me one day, she said, "No, you're acting abnormal. This is not your behavior." And that's when the whole thing started. I started to realize, but there's a lot more signs along the way, because I had an ex-girlfriend who came over. She saw what was going on. She saw how being in a particular place. We went to Niagara Falls, and my behavior was again abnormal. I wasn't interacting as much as I could have. I didn't open up. I did not let her into my pain. And she obviously then took the brunt of that, trying to understand and trying to get her head around why I was behaving the way I was. And so there was a lot of little things, and I'll read from the book in terms of the excerpts so you can get more detail, and how it all played out. But those were the little things that took place, which I didn't, again, like I said, I just knew that I was in a place. I just didn't know what it was. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna read a bit just to give you a background. So here we go. So there I was in my new home called Canada, Brampton, Greater Toronto area, or GTA to be exact. And aside from the reason for migrating, there was one other reason. I had partnered with two friends who had also had a dream of living and working in Canada. So we set up about building a company as soon as we landed. And since I would be the first to migrate, it was my responsibility to lay the groundwork and start the ball rolling until they arrived. There I was, newly arrived and excited to be in Canada, and my enthusiasm began to build business. It was to be in telecommunications. At the time, the cell mobile phone market was just evolving, and UK and Europe were at the forefront of this new technology. North America and Canada in particular were still lagging behind. We saw an opportunity and figured we would import cell mobile phones into an entirely new market. Unfortunately, and pretty soon things began to unravel. There we go. That's it. So I invested in businesses and purchased property without the financial wherewithal or knowledge as taught by the greats. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Napoleon Hill, Robert Kiyosaki, or Tony Robbins. I was like a child seeing the beautiful blue and warm Caribbean Sea for the first time, diving straight in without the thought of whether I would swim or sink. To say I nearly drowned was an understatement. There I was without any flotation devices, paddling like a newborn, going nowhere fast, and lo and behold, began to descend. Yeah, so yeah, so my journey saw me moving from one extreme to the next, my behavior floundering. I would hide as I built and collapsed businesses, earned trust yet destroyed relationships, living as if everything was great yet to be in denial. So from one extreme to the other to another, I was living a lie. So that, and that, like I said, that is to give you a background. Okay. Another part, I was scared. The impact of watching my fledgling empire crumble about me was hard to take. The business went under, my property disappeared. What made it worse was that I could not face the other people who had believed in me and invested in me. The calls began, and I chose to hide from all and sundry, refusing to take them. You know the ones, from creditors and the trusted partners I brought into one business. I felt like there was absolutely nothing I could possibly do, and with no answers, huge debt, and a failing relationship hanging over my head, I was speeding to oblivion. So yeah. So that's what happened, and like I said, the impact it had on other people around me. Because that's one thing, that I learned going through that time is that because I was only thinking about myself, I was only thinking about what was happening externally and I wasn't thinking about the people and how it's impacting on those around me who love me. You know what I mean? That was hard to take. That was hard to discern. That was hard to conceptualize. That I was hurting other people. Because I was hurting, but I was hurting other people, not realizing that my hurt was affecting them. So yeah, so it's so here we are. So this is something like I said in terms of when we went to Niagara Falls. So this is an example of how I was trying to hide. There I was driving with my girlfriend to Niagara to visit the falls, but once again I tried hiding my feelings. This time from something so mundane. I even had trouble remembering what it was, but what I do recall was the tongue lashing I received on the ride from Toronto. You see, I had a tendency to avoid confrontation. I'm willing to deal with those tough issues, having the discussions. I would choose to run away rather like when I watched hiding underneath the kitchen table and my father and my mother fought each other. My father raining licks, my mother giving as best as she could. So again, there's also that background in terms of a backstory as to why I was doing the things I was doing. So it's almost like the situation that I was in brought up stuff which I had been through as a child, So it uncovered that those things that I hadn't healed from, I hadn't been able to get any counseling for because seeing that trauma at such a young age, it stayed with me. So being under a stressful situation, it does allow it to come out, and that's what happened in that regard. So I could see, looking back and having on reflection, I can see how certain things can happen in your life, certain things can happen, but there's always something that started from somewhere, if that makes sense.
Of course, triggers.
You know what I mean? So for me, like I said, the hiding, the non-confrontational stuff started because of what I saw my mother and my father go through, and then it was compounded by what I was going through as an adult. So
yeah, I mean, once again, Shank, thank you for sharing that with us and the listeners. And there was a number of things you said there, even when you was reading out your list of different things that trigger depression, which obviously made me smile. So you spoke about there the financial issues, business pressures, work pressures, relationship breakdowns, separation, divorce, and So the last 2 years, I've been going through a divorce. I have a family, I have 3 boys, and obviously I'm going through a divorce.
Right.
And last year, I found myself in a similar situation to what you was talking about, which is,
Right.
I went into heavy depression.
Mm.
I'm not one necessarily for depression. Well, I didn't think I was, and that's the next thing. These things sometimes teach us
Yeah.
about ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't think I was, and it took me a while, like you said there as well, to actually even recognize that I was in depression. It was the mind was just constantly in a negative space.
Yeah.
Got to a point where I couldn't get out of bed anymore. It just felt so
Yeah.
cloudy. It just felt
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
why bother? I
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah. Yeah.
eating, wasn't taking care of myself. In the process, I lost 2 businesses.
Mm.
I lost 2 businesses, and obviously that compounded the issue because of the financial stress. And
Yeah.
the truth is, and I can share this now, it got so bad that I got to the point that I was actually suicidal.
Mm.
And the only thing that kept me was the fact that I have 3 boys who I love so
Mm.
dearly. It's like, what would be the impact on them?
Yes.
But I couldn't see any way out.
Yeah.
And it was really, I mean, for months I wasn't able to work. And those of you know me, like, I've been working for years. I don't not work, right? I'm
Yeah.
not working if I'm not working on projects or working with clients. But
Yeah.
it actually came to the point where it's just like, are you available, boy? You know what? I'm not available
Yeah.
for months, and regardless of what was happening to the bank account, it's just I couldn't function.
Yes.
Fortunately for me, it was a case of um, through church, through God, through the support network that was around there that helped me to be able
Yeah.
to rebuild myself, face another day, and get to the point. So what you're talking about there is real.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
And now we're also going into a context of tier 4. For some people, how is this going to impact them?
Well, like you know, aside from the politics of it all, I don't
Yeah,
think
that's right.
I don't think we the repercussions of this time we've seen yet. I think we're still trying to digest, how to maneuver it really. And for example, can't see anyone at Christmas and that kind of stuff. So people are still trying to maneuver themselves around it.
True.
But I think the magnitude of this time will be probably felt 6 months down the line. In my mind, I think because 3 to 6 months down the line, because like I said, until there's some sort of normality and people's lives get to some sort of routine and stuff, that's when we're going to start to see a lot more people having issues. Up to last week, I don't know if you heard, there's a brother out of Luton by the name of Mark Anthony Clark. He did he did same sort of community work and everything else, Jamaican guy, and he took his life. Yeah, he was depressed, and I said if I had known, I'd have reached out to him. But I didn't. It's only afterwards that I heard by a friend that she said that she was crying. She said, "Why? She can't believe it." Because he was like a same thing like what Paul did with you and with myself. It was the same sort of role that he played. So I think there's a lot of us, and the isolation, the uncertainty, the financial woes, the stress that brings, maybe having a family around and you can't even see a family. So there's going to be a lot of those things that are going to come and have an impact more so as time goes on, and we're going to see a lot more people, having trouble with that. And this tier 4 issue is gonna bring it out. But I like I said, I personally feel that we haven't started to feel the magnitude of it yet until till sometime in the 6 months or to a year down the line.
I think I agree with you there, because if we even look at it from an economic point of view, right? So many businesses have had a stop and start, stop and start.
Mm,
Many were hoping that Christmas would give them that lifeline. That's been
exactly.
taken away. The financial impact of that, and the people are going to lose their
Yeah.
businesses, which then might then mean their houses,
Yeah.
relationships, and all of these
Exactly.
things might
Exactly.
take some time to play out. But
Yeah.
like you said, many people might find themselves in a situation which all of us find ourselves in a situation which is out of our hands. And in my experience, sometimes the feeling that we have no control over
Yes.
our situation is enough to bring on that depression in itself, right? Like,
Exactly.
out of my hands, nothing I do is going to make a difference. So I agree
Exactly.
with you there.
Yeah.
That's going to
Exactly.
have a big impact.
And that's a frightening thing, and I don't think there's the support there for it, for what's coming, because as we've seen, local authorities have been chopped to the bone really well. You know, there's no support for it, and it's only going to become an issue when we start to see, for example, when we start to see more domestic violence, when we start to see more suicides, when we start to see, and I mean a massive increase in those kind of
Alcohol,
people.
drug abuse, all these other bits
Yeah.
and pieces. Yeah.
And when we start to see an increase right across the board, that's when they're gonna start to realize, oh wow, social. You know, what I mean, you're gonna start thinking about the social aspect of what people have gone through. Because I don't think it's been talked about as much, even though there has been evidence of these things happening and increasing. There's not. I don't think there's enough in place for it for people to be helped or to be assisted. As the time goes on, and like I said, as we said, I'm not going to say there's no money available for these kind of things. So it's going to be tricky, and yeah, in a sense, when I look at the situation, I guess you probably look at the situation too in terms of what you've been through. I more or less said I am fortunate in that regard because I've experienced my aspect of being in that place, you know. So I can look at this time and say, okay, it's another time. There's a lot of upheaval, but you know what? Life goes on. I can take the positive out for it and move forward. There's other people who haven't gone through this. You know what I mean? Or haven't you know, we've been busy, we're working, we're college or whatever it is, you know, 24/7. And then all of a sudden, all of that's taken away. You know, that's hard to deal with.
It is, and I think you hit a key point there. Like I said, I mean, I'm blessed and fortunate that in many ways I'm actually grateful I went through that process because
Yeah, same here.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It helped me recognize how to deal with these things. It
Yep.
helped me to recognize that attachment to certain things in life can create these situations. So it's
That's
helped
right.
me to find that inner strength. And like you said, I'm fortunate that I went through it at a time when everybody else wasn't going through their stuff.
Exactly.
So the key
Exactly.
people, you know, I had a few select male friends and, you know, men from church and the church were able to support me. But right now, like you said, everyone's going through it.
Yeah.
Everyone's dealing with it.
Yeah.
And Christmas, let's face it, Christmas is for a lot of people, and I know a lot of people were holding on that, okay, well, it's been a bad year, but at least I'll be able to have Christmas and move into the new year. Then last minute, just as people are buying their turkeys and all this bit, you get this piece of news. I mean, that's really gonna, I mean, I've spoken to a few people that I know, and it's just like, well, what's the plans for Christmas? Boy, I'm spending on my own.
Exactly. So can you imagine the impact of that alone? You know, aside from everything else.
That's what I'm saying. Forget
You know?
everything else. Just that little bit.
Just that little bit, you know. So and like I said, fortunately for me, and I guess and that's where my book has helped other people because I had a seminar with ex and serving soldiers from Jamaica Defense Force.
Right, okay.
Right. So it was interesting in terms of dialogue that we were having because as I'm sharing here with yourselves and the audience, is how I shared with them. And we had a debate and a discussion on and about that and about being in a depressive state and not recognizing it, understanding what were the causes and how to come out with everything else. And I think that discussion will need to be had on a regular basis. So this platform and forum is great because we need to have a lot of discussion going forward. And like I said, and I think, and I really, even though the women our women are great in terms of managing this kind of thing, I think that men in particular, in my view, men in particular, we need that support where we can actually come out and talk about what we're going through. Because I'm telling you, so can you imagine you're a man. You get up every day, you go to work, you know, you come in, you have your children, you look after your kids, and then all of a sudden, it's, you know what I mean, that impact alone, you know, and I think a lot of men won't be able to know how to manage it. So what we tend to do, we internalize it, and then it manifests itself negatively.
Of course.
You know what I mean? It manifests itself in violence, it manifests in abuse, as we just said, and everything else. And so I think that we need to have the space and the time and make and create it where we can actually talk about what we're going through, you know?
Of course. And also, we should also recognize that for some men, it might manifest itself in violence and domestic abuse. For other men who don't, you know what I mean, that's not how it manifests. It's more of an internal
Yeah,
process. And
yeah,
as we know, you know, the toxins from depression lead to certain type of diseases and cancer and
exactly. Yeah,
diabetes. I
yeah,
mean, that was
yeah,
an interesting thing as well, which I didn't even mention, just so that
yeah,
everybody also understands this connection.
yes.
During the height of my depression, when I was getting a blood check, it was like, oh, and by the way, you're pre-diabetic. Like,
No.
okay, well, it's genetically my family, but like, yeah, well, everything you're going through right now is triggered it. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? So now
Yes.
I've got that health concern. So it's recognizing that as we internalize across the board, human beings, as we internalize it, it
Yes.
builds up toxins within us.
That's right.
You see,
Disease.
right?
Cause
It builds up
disease inside.
toxins
Yes.
within
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
at a
True.
season like this. And I guess also women, is it a case of that women are better able to? I have this theory. It's just a theory. I believe that women are emotionally stronger than men,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I also have this theory that women in general tend to be great at speaking. So women have this thing whereby they can easily talk to their girlfriend. Sometimes
Yeah.
it makes men uncomfortable. Like, we took telling the business, like, oh yeah, I just met her yesterday, and they can tell everything and let it go. Whereas
Yeah.
us men, it can take us years and years. Like, okay, now I know him. Yeah, I'm gonna tell him a little bit more about me. Let's wait
Yeah.
another 10 years, and I'm gonna tell him a little bit more.
That's true. And I funny enough because I had this discussion with someone. I said that the best forum for men to talk is in the barber shop, right? But guess what?
Got it.
But guess what? We talk about politics, we talk about football, and we talk about women. We don't talk about stuff that really matters in a sense. You know what I mean? Or we skim over the surface. You know?
We do. We gotta maintain that facade, right? That it's all good, even
Exactly.
when it's so not good. Um,
Exactly.
and it's,
Exactly.
I guess there's also that challenge, right? As men, it's like being vulnerable with another man, but also being vulnerable with another woman. Is there enough trust
Yeah.
in this space? Can I
Yeah.
be vulnerable enough that actually she'll still see me as a man, but accept that
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
all my emotions and my weaknesses that go with that? Can she
Yes.
still, accommodate that? And with
Yeah.
another man, can I demonstrate that actually?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what? I have my moments when I'm off the charts and I'm just like under it, and can they lift me up as opposed to pull me down?
Yes.
I remember
Yes.
you put something interesting yesterday, which I shared in a group that we've got. So we've got a group called My Brother's Keepers. So for any
Yeah.
male out there who might be watching this, go on Facebook, you'll find a group, My Brother's Keepers, which is intended to be a safe space for men to be able to express and find support for each other through life's ups and downs. But you put up something which was the question about, should men express their love for each other more, which I put in that group. What do you think about that? Personally, I've got no problem expressing
Yeah.
love for a brother who, I feel deserves it. I've got no problem telling a friend, and when I say brother, just we're using it loosely, but a friend, bro, I love you, man. Ain't
Yeah,
nothing.
exactly. I think it's interesting because when I went to Ghana, I took a trip to Ghana and I'm due to go back there years ago. But what I saw there was men holding hands. Now there was nothing untoward into it. Just what I mean, it's just men holding hands and what I mean, and walking. I was like, okay, what I mean. But and then I began to realize that that's how they show brotherly love. You know what I mean? And there's nothing with that. But then when you come further west, you realize that you know.
So let me tell you a quick story. So I went to Nigeria on a 6-week holiday when I was 10.
Right.
I came back when I was 14. You guys do the maths, right? But all the other Africans out there, they will get it, right? It's like, oh, don't worry, we're going for holiday. The next minute, it's like, oh, yeah, you're looking for a school, but I'm going to go, no, you're staying here.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, yeah,
when I came back, right, I remember there was a guy when I came back and I was in secondary school. There was another Nigerian guy who I met when I came back at the age of 14.
yeah. Right.
And we used to walk down the road holding hands. Because in
Right.
Nigeria, like I said, it's like no reason to me. It's nothing in it. We used to get ew, ish, ish. And over time, I culturally changed. Like, oh, this is not acceptable. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to. Do you know what I mean? So I hear you.
Yeah, yeah. So from like I said, and yeah, like you, I've now come to be more open when it comes to my Bridget. I said because there's a friend of mine who actually was going through a lot of stuff. Again, I was talking to him. I sent him my book and everything, and he was going through a lot of stuff. And I said, Bridget, I love you, star. You can't afford, what I mean. And talk to him in a way that I said, yeah, man, I love you, Bridget. We love you. You know what I mean?
Mm,
I don't feel no way about it. You know what I
mm.
mean? But yeah, it is something that I guess we have to get back to because not something that's far alien to us. You know what I mean? It's something that we need to get back to. And be our brother's keeper in a sense.
Amen.
Mm, you
Awesome.
know.
So I mean, I think we shared some really, really. We had a great conversation, definitely from at least from what I'm learning and what I'm receiving and what I'm also able to let go as a part of the sharing on the show. So thank you very much. So as we start getting close to wrapping up, what tips have you got for people out there? Because like we said, we're going through. Some people are going to go through challenging time, and we know
Yeah,
that it's going to be on the spectrum. They're going to be those who are like, okay, get on with it. And there's gonna be
Yeah.
people like, whoa, really, this is like the last straw.
Yeah.
What
The,
tips you got?
the thing I learned in my journey is to talk. That's a main one. It's to talk. Find someone or open up to someone who is you get a vibe with, or there's the connection that you can be open with them. Someone who you, because I have that platform, or that where I can actually open up, to who someone's closest to me, or and I have no fear of doing that now, because you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I think
standard.
yeah, exactly. Once you get past the barrier, then you know what I mean. I talk to, and so I have that. Fortunately, I have that with a number of people around me. So that's the main thing, is to be able to talk. The other thing which I found very therapeutic was to write. That is so important. It enables one to express, it enables one to capture one's thoughts, and it enables one to reflect sometimes when they've gone through a particular journey. So, and I guess when I was going through what I was going through, like I said, I was able to reflect and write what I was going through at that time, and I was able to look back and see where I was at that space. So I think it's important that we be able to capture our thoughts in that regard. The other thing which I also think is very important is to be still. We have not been able to be still for a long time. This lockdown has caused us and forced us to be still. You know what I mean? And that's when the thoughts come bombarding, and that's when really and truly, once you're still, then you can reflect. And I think we've been so busy, or we've been channeled to be busy. You know what I mean? Channel to work, college, university, whatever it is, business, whatever. So we're always busy. So we've always been busy doing something, but we haven't been busy with ourselves in terms of stopping and just taking time to breathe and to reflect on who I am, and why I'm here and that kind of thing. So I think it's important also to be still. And then it's about reading good books. It's about not allowing negativity to come into your mind space. Having good people around you, who will support you in whatever it is that you're going through. Those are my tips, my probably five, 6 tips that I would say are important to.
Really, so good.
And the other thing, which I also probably omitted, is that when it becomes too much, seek counseling. Because there's a scenario that I was going through, and it was suggested to me by the ex at the time. I asked her, I actually said to her, I needed help because I didn't know what the issue was. And she then said, you know what, I'll refer to a counselor, which is what I did. And I got counseling. So there's no shaming that. You know what I mean? There's no shame. Once you feel like you can't manage or deal with what you're going through, there's no shame in asking for help from a professional.
Awesome. I think there's some really good tips there. I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. I'm gonna say, great. Let's take it back along the spectrum. So there's gonna be some people now, like we said, who've never dealt with this before, who haven't got anybody, or in their mind they haven't got anybody that they can open up to. Too depressed to write, because like I said, when I was going through my depression, no word of lie, there were some days when I wouldn't get out of bed. The most I could do was get out of bed to go on wee, because in my mind it's like, boy, if you go on wee on yourself in your bed with everything else that's going on, that'll be the final straw. So I roll out of bed literally to go toilet and then get back in bed. Wouldn't want to drink, wouldn't want to eat, wouldn't want to talk to nobody. Right? Right? What? Right? What? No, the brain is fully bombarded by all of these negative scenarios, everything happening. And then counseling, I mean, to get counselors right now over the next, week or so, forget about that. And I'm sure their backlog for counselors is going to be long for those who can even access it. What things can somebody who finds themselves, or anybody who's watching right now, who might know somebody who is in this space or is likely to fall within that space, within the next 3 days, because Christmas is only 3 days away.
Yeah.
What practical short things do you think they could do?
Well, it's interesting because I do know of situations and scenarios where the person just didn't want. They chose to be in that space. You know what I mean? They chose they made a choice that this is where they wanted to be, even though like what you highlighted, all the support that I've said and everything else was in place for that person to come out of. and the individuals trying to and cajoling them and trying to get them to come out of that space, they chose not to. So to a great extent, there's not, if somebody chooses to be in that space and they don't seek help, or they're not open to help, there's not a lot you can actually do. All you can do, or an individual can do, especially someone who can identify, because in my scenario, fortunately for me, it was my cousin who saw what I was going through, and she loved me enough to let me know that, you know what, this is not you. You know, for somebody who's isolated, especially right now, again, it's probably just picking up the phone and just making a phone call. You know, just reaching out. I had posted something that saying that we should tend to just reach out to someone. You know what I mean? If you haven't heard from them, reach out, and maybe on a regular basis, especially if you know that they're alone. And especially if you know that your situation is not as bad as, you know, and like I said, I tend to just call people out of the blue. I said, hey, how are you doing? You know, how's everything going on? So that is one standpoint. For the individual who's in the scenario, who's going through what they're going through, it is difficult. And like I said, I'm no psychologist, I'm no physiologist. I just know that based on my own experience, if somebody chooses to be in that space and not seeking help, it can be difficult. It can be difficult. But that someone who recognizes that can always offer help and always offer the love to support them in what they're going through.
Of course. No, I appreciate it. I think I'm hoping that as listeners, we're recognizing that, you know, there are going to be people around us. As you heard from Kwame's story, there's going to be some things, there are going to be people around us who, number one, will elicit behaviors.
Yeah, who love us. People who love us.
Who love us, but I'm also saying that there's going to be people around us who are going to elicit behaviors which may not be consistent. So that's going to be require those of us who might be in a good space to be mindful. Mindfulness, we talk about mindfulness from a personal point, but also asking us to extend that to a wider. So let's reach out to those, even if it's just a phone call. Sometimes just hey, look, I'm here for you. I love you. Right? And call somebody to open up. Even if they don't want to, and you know, they might bring it out, but sometimes that's even enough for somebody to hold on to another day, because sometimes deep depression is just really about day to day. Can I make it tomorrow?
And you'd be surprised that one phone call and just you saying that you're open and I love you, that alone will just trigger something in someone, you know. So yeah, for sure. And that's what I totally agree with what you just said.
And I know for me, like I said, the height for me was really my personal connection with God. And when I speak God, I'm speaking whatever God looks like for anybody, but recognizing that there's a higher being. And I always say to people, there's a power in recognizing that there's a higher being.
Totally.
Even if there isn't one, right? But I believe strongly.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
If you hold on to that concept of something being higher than everything beyond, that can be your last straw. That all the evidence, everything around me says no, but I'm gonna hold on to something being higher just to get me that strength and get through. And you typically, when you go through that, you then experience God once again, whatever God looks like in whatever form for you, and that's a whole other relationship you build.
And you know, exactly. And it's funny you should say that, because you just reminded me. When I was going through, the higher being, of, you know, I mean, whatever someone said to me, you tried all these businesses, they failed. What is it that what is the purpose? Why are you here? That's a question that came to me, though. And it was during that time that the answer came that, hold on a minute, you love writing. You've always written poetry. That's where you've empowered and inspired people, through your writing. And because of that conversation that I had, because of defining what my life purpose is, I was able to put my first book together, which is a poetry book called Our Eternal Legacy. And that was where the whole entire my purpose in life now started. And it's because that question was asked. You know what I mean? And you could try all these other businesses. They're not going to work until you discover what your life purpose is. And that's where, like I said, it started for me. You know, I was able to discover my life purpose because of being in that space.
Now, I hear you on that one. And when you were speaking, that just reminded me of J.K. Rowling. I think the story was that she was at a point of depression when she wrote her first Harry Potter book, right? And it's
exactly. Exactly.
For anybody out there who might be like, okay, talking, you know, I mean, that might be a bit beyond. Just recognize that depression, when you stop and able to look at it, it's a
Yeah,
series of negative voices in the mind, just
that's right.
telling you that everything's come to an end.
Yeah,
What we're talking about there is actually hold on to a positive voice, which pulls
yeah,
you through that and says, actually, you know
that's
what?
right.
And when you said that as well, I mean, I think for me, the point where things really changed when I constantly kept on hearing that voice, which was similar, where you've tried everything and look where you are. Why not just let go and let me deal with it?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you know what? When I was able to get myself to that point that, okay, I'm just giving this over. It's beyond anything I can do.
yeah,
There's nothing I can do to change this situation.
yeah,
I'm just going to give it in the belief of God. I'm going to give it over and
yeah,
let God take it. Guess what? The
yeah,
storm continues
yeah.
and around me, but I'm at peace.
Exactly,
Whatever. This
exactly,
ain't my
and
problem. It's beyond me. So I'm not going to
exactly,
worry about that because
exactly, exactly. And that's why we can stand up in the storm that's going on now, right? It's
that's
because
it.
exactly that, exactly that. You know,
Awesome.
for real, for real, man, for real, for
Great
real,
stuff.
for real.
Awesome. So as we start wrapping up, this has been awesome. How can people get hold of you? How can people get hold of you for your
Alrighty.
various handles?
They can, well, website's down at the moment, but they can email me, Kwame, Kwame,
Yep.
M.A. McPherson, McPherson, at gmail.com.
Up on the screen. Yep.
I'm on Twitter at Kwame MA. LinkedIn is Kwame McPherson. Facebook, Arthur Kwame McPherson. Instagram, actually, I didn't put out Maxkey, MAXKEY, MAXKEY. So, you know, I'm pretty, you know, I mean, pretty easy to get a hold of on social media in that regard. So yeah.
Awesome. I
You know.
mean, thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. Like I said, for me, this
Yeah,
has been a
thank you,
great
Eddie.
conversation.
Thank you very much.
If
Thank you.
anybody's listening out there, please put your comments and feedback. Let us know what worked for you about this. And I guess for me, what I'm taking from this is recognizing that some of us, and I'm sure many of you who are listening, may have experienced the
Mm.
experience of depression in different shapes or forms. I believe that puts us in a
Oh.
better position to have. Oh yes, the book. Yeah.
The book is available on Amazon, actually. Yeah, so it's anyone.
What is the subtitle read again? The subtext? What's the
It's
subtext?
my date with depression
And the subtext underneath it is what?
is
Underneath from
from mental uncertainty to self fulfillment.
there you go. From mental
So yeah, so
uncertainty
it's
to,
available on Amazon. Yeah,
and I think that's the key part, right? Depression is really uncertainty. All of those things create it, and it's a mental thing. But for those of us who may have been for that journey or in a good space right now, please let's, especially over the next 3 days, let's
yeah,
reach out to people, give people
yeah,
a call, and also take on board some of the conversations that we've had. Just because you think, oh no, he's all right, she's all right, it don't
yeah.
mean that's the case, right?
No, it
In
doesn't.
fact, it's the people who look all right on the outside
Yeah,
who sometimes are the most vulnerable. We're struggling to
that's
keep
true.
up a facade. And I know that for
Yeah,
me, after a while, it's like, okay, I can't go out no more because you know what? I can't even deal with the world no more.
yeah,
I don't want the next person to ask me, "Are you okay?" I don't, because I
yeah,
don't want to say I am, because I
yeah,
can't.
yeah,
And if
yeah,
somebody else, I'm just gonna lose it. I'm just gonna break down. So it's like, let me just stay at home, and do you know what I mean? So let's be mindful. Let's reach out for people that we know. Let's encourage people we know to reach out. Let's each
yeah.
one reach out for each other during this period as best as we can.
Totally, completely agree. Adi, completely agree. I agree with that entirely, and thank you for the opportunity to share. You know, because I love sharing, and like I said, it's one of the things that I'm blessed to do. You know, so thank you. Humbled.
Like I said, bro, I mean, I'm grateful to you. You've obviously, you know, what I mean, gone through your journey, and sometimes that's the thing. And here's one other last tip I'll leave with people as well. Sometimes we've got to recognize that whilst we're in the storm, we can't understand why we're in the storm.
Yeah,
But when you pull through the storm, you get that
yeah,
opportunity to look back and say, okay, now I
yes,
know why I had to go through that route and
that's
that
right.
storm and that experience to be where I am right now. As we're
Yeah,
hearing with
that's
Kwame,
right.
the fact that Kwame's been through that means that even without the degree of being a psychologist or any of those things which you don't necessarily need, you can relate
Yeah,
to it. You can have the compassion.
exactly.
You can
Yeah,
help somebody. You can save a life. And I think
yeah,
sometimes that's enough to help us get through to have that just, I don't know what's going on right now. This makes no sense. This
yeah,
is just like, but if I can just hang on there a little bit
yeah,
longer, one day
yeah,
I'm going to look back and say, I get
yeah,
it. And you
exactly,
know what? You might even get to that place where you're like, I appreciate that.
exactly, exactly. Totally agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
So, guys out there just well, so just remember, Circulate. We're on YouTube, so follow us, Circulate there. You get us on Insta, Circulate the Back. £1, and you can also find us on Facebook, which is Circulate. So, but once again, Kwame, just want to say really, really appreciate what you've shared.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And continue doing the work you're doing, man. Well done. You know, I appreciate
It's people like you, people like the Paul Lamerses and all the other people within the community who inspire and motivate me, and also help me to keep going when I have bad days. That you know what I mean. And I also think that's one of the great things about when you can find a network, just like what we're trying to do with My Brother's Keeper, where you can share stuff. Because sometimes I've had moments where I'm feeling like, boy, I'm really depressed and really bad, but then somebody shares something with me, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm complaining about what? In fact, you know what? I'm grateful for what I got, because that.
Yeah.
And then you also look at the way that they compose themselves through that. That inspires you.
Yes, totally. You know, yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, then, my brother. Well, once again, really appreciate it. Where people? Did you say where people can get your book from?
Yeah, books available on Amazon, basically. So that they can go on and just search for My Date with Depression, and they'll definitely find it.
Cool. Just a warning to anybody who's thinking about buying that as a gift for somebody. Make sure the person is in the right space to be able to receive.
Funny enough, I had somebody order one from me because I had some direct, but someone else exactly for that actually.
Just making sure that people are in the right space, because you know what I mean. This is a time of triggers, traumas, and all these other bits and pieces. So let's spread some love for each other.
Totally.
Kwame, again, appreciate you taking your time out. Thank you. All that's left is to wish you a very happy festive season and a happy new year.
Yeah,
so to all the listeners out there, once again, really appreciate your support. Hopefully you've got something of value from this, and hopefully, there'll be something here that can help at least one person who's going through depression right now, or can give somebody some ideas how to reach out and help somebody that you may know or may not even be aware yet, but maybe a kind of flag for you to be able to reach out and help them. Because trust me, don't underestimate that sometimes a phone call can save a life. In fact, let me wrap up with a story. It just came to my mind, which I think I will share with you. So I remember hearing about this story of a man who was winning an award. He went up to win an award for being CEO or whatever. And when he went up for the award, he said, thank you. But he said something, I'm not quite can't remember, but let me just give you the concept behind it. But he basically said he was grateful for what he had achieved, but actually he's also grateful for the fact that he shouldn't have been there. And he gave a story. He said that when he was young in school, he was constantly being bullied. And then on a particular day, he was feeling really down. And then on his way back home, he was carrying his books, and some kids came over, knocked him, and he dropped all the books on the floor. And as he was picking up his books, he had reserved in his mind that, you know what, I'm going to go home. I'm going to kill myself. I've had enough. Right. He said a stranger came out of nowhere. Helped him pick up the books. Patted him on the shoulder and went away. I think said something like just a kind word, like, hang in there, don't worry about them, or something. And he said that was the key thing that made him not go home and kill himself. Just one act of kindness. So the point I'm making is, do not underestimate what one act of kindness, one phone call, one smile, one I love you. Can have. So you listeners, I love you all. Have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And let's look out for each other. Awesome. Much love.
Yes.